many years, and of course have always been a fan of his Dawn columns. So it's a great honor for me to be here in conversation with him today. And I just want to reinforce one thing that was said here, which is that he wears many hats. So he is a journalist, but he's also a historian, a satirist, a cultural critic. And I think the strength of his writings, and particularly the book that is under discussion today, is this fantastic intersection of politics, history, and culture. So we will draw upon a number of themes that come up. The title of the book is We the Mob, Three Populist Uprisings. We'll just sort of unpack that. But I just want to start by saying, please join me in welcoming Paracha Saab today. So, Paracha Saab, this is a really fantastic book because it's not focused in isolation on Pakistan. And one of its greatest strengths is that it draws on a very comparative framework, three extremely different contexts. We're looking at Pakistan in comparison with Brazil and the United States. And one would wonder, well, what is the commonality here? And strangely enough, in our globalized world, it always makes sense to expand our analytical horizon to understand how things are happening around the world, because they have a very evident sort of impact on things that happen locally at home. So the very interesting observation here is that three uprisings, also referred to by some people as insurrections, have happened in three very different contexts, and they share some really uncanny similarities despite very different, nuanced historical trajectories. And so Paracha Saab has set out to think through and explore a framework that would help us understand and explain how this is happening. And why it is that these three characters, Trump, Bolsonaro, and Imran Khan, have come to take on populist characteristics which are extremely similar, despite the fact that these are three very different individuals. So without more ado, over to you. If you could tell us a bit about, first of all, your motivation for writing this book, and just a basic sort of statement of what you set out to actually explore. Thank you.
Thank you, Maryam. Basically, when my book, Imran Khan, The Myth of Pakistani Middle Class, was published, and incidentally, it came out just a few days before the May 9 riots and uprising in the insurrection, jo bhi aap kahe. So, when I started to investigate the May 9 and 10 riots in Pakistan, I started noticing similarities जो Trump के ज़माने में जब पहली इसकी जो हुकूमत, when he lost the election in 2020, and then January 2021 में there was an attack at the Capitol Hill, which is considered to be a sacred symbol of democracy in America. And then in 2022, I think, Brazil में एक right-wing populist थे, वो election हारे, and वहाँ Congress, Brazil की Congress और Capitol पे इसी तरह attack हुआ. Fine, but the most interesting bit was all three uprisings apparently supposed to be revolutionary. They were trying to get the attention of the military. In Trump's case, जहाँ वो deep state कहते हैं, they realized that they have a lot of support in the American military for Trump. So if they trigger something, कुछ fear फैलाएं, especially in the Congress से हो तो, so that faction which was apparently, supposedly pro-Trump will say कि okay, stop the results, Biden का announcement आप ना करें, recounting करें जो वगैरह, ठीक है? Brazil में exactly यही हुआ. thousands of people came out, they attacked the Congress, and they then started holding rallies outside army installations over there and started inviting the army to intervene to overturn the result. तो आप मे 9 पे भी देखें, अब मे 9 पे एलिजेड ये है कि जी वो इसलिए करवाया गया कि जनरल फैज़ हमीद जो थे उन्होंने इनको बता दिया था कि जी डिविजन्स हैं मिलिट्री के अंदर, एंड if you sort of bring that out through writing, through violence, तो आर्मी के अंदर डिवीजन हो जाएगा, there will be mutiny, the sitting COAS will be removed, and मतलब मेरा कहने का ये कि तीनों के goals extremely similar थे, mechanics of the uprisings were more or less similar, and then as I go ahead in the book, I decide why they were similar, उसके economic reasons क्या हैं, even though remember I'm talking about 3 different populist uprisings in 3 different continents and 3 different cultures. So the similarity bit was the fascinating. तो I thought इस पे थोड़ी और रिसर्च करके कुछ लिखा जाए, so we can understand ये populism की wave की जो हम बात करते हैं है क्या.
Thank you. And so one very crucial thing in this global turn to populism, as you point out, is the middle classes. And you know, it's really important जब हम सियासत की बात कर रहे हैं, culture की बात कर रहे हैं, to bring in class analysis, because that's how you really peel the layers down to what is happening. Because of course this is not just about one individual, it's about society as a whole, it's about fissures within that society, and particularly class-based fissures. Now I remember that a few years ago when Mr. Imran Khan had a vote of no confidence against him, you know, people were writing about the middle class phenomenon. And people on social media would get really defensive and even upset about this notion of the middle class. And it's really interesting if you go back to reading history from the 60s and 70s, जब PPP का phenomenon था, so there was a lot of work done on the middle class. And very recently also, there was a lot of work done on the middle class. There was, you know, a number of scholars have written on the class structure of Pakistan. And this is really crucial. It's not something to be defensive about. It really helps you break down कि social fabric जो है वो किस तरह से divide हुआ हुआ है और across what kinds of discourses and viewpoints. So can you say something about this notion of the middle classes and how it's connected to what you refer to as conspiracy theories, you know, and how people become gullible to actually believing things that may not be actually true in reality?
Conspiracy theories have always been around for centuries, I would say. But in this day and age, and the last, I would say, 20 years, social media की वजह से जो चीज़ें जो बिल्कुल fringe of society पे थी, they have come into the mainstream. Now we actually have presidents, like for example, the president of America, actually spouting those conspiracy theories. We saw that in Brazil as well. You know, they actually talk about those conspiracy theories. So they're always there. And I must add something that, yes, one can say about 90% of conspiracy theories emerge from some sort of insecurity, डर होता है, but उनमें से 10% सही भी निकल आती है, ठीक है? Because in the end it's a theory. But middle class की जहाँ तक बात है, mine is, at least not in this book, it's not a very academic look at the middle class. It's more anecdotal, in the sense I come from the same class, right? But मैंने इसमें difference देखा है कि यहाँ बड़ा हम लोग club कर देते हैं. For example, पाकिस्तान में एक मिडिल क्लास सिंध के अंदर भी सिंधी मिडिल क्लास इमर्ज कर रही है और करती आ रही है. उसकी जो एवोल्यूशन है, ग्रोथ है, दैट्स वेरी डिफरेंट उसके डायनेमिक्स देन द मिडिल क्लास दैट रोज इन पंजाब, केपी एंड बलूचिस्तान. बिकॉज देखें, सिंध का तो मैं ओपनली बड़े आराम से कह सकता हूँ कि सिंध की मिडिल क्लास स्टार्टेड टू इमर्ज एंड बिकम started gaining some economic power during the last कब से पीपल्स पार्टी की हुकूमत 2008 से, ठीक है? So their economic interests are directly linked with the survival of their party in that. लाहौर में मैंने जो नोटिस किया, जो तो मेरी रिसर्च कहती है कि मिडिल क्लास बलून करना शुरू हुई इन द 1980s 90s ऑनवर्ड्स. बट एक और इंटरेस्टिंग चीज़ जो मुझे मिली, जो मैंने इससे पहली किताब में ज़्यादा डिटेल में लिखा है, टू मी व्हाट वी आर सीइंग नाउ, जिसको हम पोलराइजेशन कहते हैं, जिसको हम फिजर्स कहते हैं, it is not a battle between the middle classes with the elite, nor is a battle between the middle classes and the working classes. What we are seeing is actually fissures within the middle classes. They are the ones, one can say कि the middle class की भी एक elite है. They are fighting against each other for power. जो नई middle class है, which we saw, जो मुशर्रफ के ज़माने में they started to come of age, they didn't want to be related to old traditional politics of Sharif Bradran in Punjab especially. So they thought of themselves as more cosmopolitan, more educated, more different. ठीक है? So that constituency जो मुशर्रफ के ज़माने में middle class की, मैं पंजाब की बात कर रहा हूँ, develop हुई and कराची की, because Urdu middle class also sort of evolved along with the Punjabi middle class, but both were considered to be the most influential classes, elite classes, when Pakistan was made. So basically, they, जो मुशर्रफ की constituency थी, it landed on the lap of Imran Khan when during his rise. देखिए one man party थी 2009-10 तक. 2011 में हम देखते हैं एक suddenly huge rally होती है, and I saw that rally. I was fascinated because they were like, majority of them came from middle class families, अपने बच्चों के साथ, families के साथ आए हुए थे. So that was a show that we are different from the rowdy rallies of Mian Nawaz Sharifs and Bhuttos. We are different, right? So this is what I'm seeing is but the so-called sophisticated and cosmopolitan middle class जो थी ना, they had more tendency, or maybe they thought that this populism is going to sort of give them something through which they can defer themselves from the mundane, old-fashioned, conventional political classes, middle classes. तो अब देखिए conspiracy theories को आप रोक नहीं सकते, उसके लिए पूरा आपको social media रोकना होगा. You can't. Of course, now we have accounts, fact check accounts, ये वो, लेकिन जिसकी conspiracy theory को, for example, 1 लाख likes मिलते हैं, fact check को 10 भी नहीं मिलते. Who's watching? ठीक? So we have to live with this reality and try to figure out how to navigate around it. But I would find this to be rather dangerous. There's so many, because conspiracy theory, if it's according to what you believe, you will definitely like it, love it, retweet it. You will never give any hoot about someone saying, though this is fake. So middle classes have jumped on that bandwagon. Like I said, ये बड़ी fringe की चीज़ होती थी, चाहे वो अमेरिका हो, चाहे कोई और कंट्री. fringe पे ये लोग रहते थे, वहीं अपनी वो aluminium hat लगा के बैठ के, they used to talk about alien invasions and whatever. Now that whole culture all over the world, thanks to social media, has come into the mainstream. And that is creating issues. और इसमें middle class का बहुत बड़ी involvement है, because they are the ones who are using the social media in a most brilliant, innovative manner, if one can call that.
Thank you. And maybe you could say a bit more about the US context. So you were there, you were traveling, and you were covering the Trump election. You've also, of course, excavated all of these surveys and studies that have been happening there. और शायद आपको बड़ी दिलचस्पी हो ये जानने में that some of these studies show that it's not just the rural or the working class vote that has gone to Trump, people who feel that they're disenfranchised. This is also middle classes which are educated, they're professionals, they're doctors, lawyers, so on and so forth. And so it's really, doesn't seem to have much of a correlation with the level of formal education that you've received. Could you say a bit more about, these interesting common threads that you're seeing in these three jurisdictions?
I was there during the 2024 election जो हुए in the US. 3-4 states में मैंने बात की. The most interesting bit was, और मेरी study से निकल के आया कि majority of people who attacked the Capitol building in Washington DC, majority of them weren't these mad far-right people. Yes, they were there as well, but they were like doctors, teachers, he said, professionals, students studying in Ivy colleges, universities. That was fascinating. Again, yes, Trump did try to get the working class vote as well, because working class over there in, let's say, states like Michigan, who are very democratic strongholds. But Democrats जो हैं वहाँ I started notice they started getting into identity politics, wokeism जिसको कहते हैं, abstract stuff. The working class will have find what is that giving, हमें क्या मिल रहा है इससे, So they shifted, even though most probably they knew Trump is bullshitting कि हम Michigan को फिर एक industrial state बना देंगे and all that. But they felt alienated. Middle class का वहाँ, they were all white middle class. अब वो पढ़े लिखे लोग वहाँ मैं मिला, they have started to believe what is called the replacement theory, that the whites of the United States are going to be replaced by blacks, browns, Asians, South Asians, Africans. They had started to believe that because उनके neighborhoods में अगर उनके 4 घर हैं, जो 4 apartments हैं, उनमें से 6 जो है वो non-white हैं. And then that's what they were saying. And like, for example, I was in Denver, which is a stronghold of Democratic Party, and I found very liberal, nice people, white people over there. But वहाँ मुझे थोड़ा नजर आया कि यार जब ट्रम्प में मैंने बात की, yeah, they said, well, he's mad and he's all that, but then they had this other argument as well. But you see, the Democratic Party is now only interested in very social issues, but we are more interested in कि economics हमारे किस तरह बेहतर होंगे. तो वो shift मुझे नजर आ रहा था. तो मुझे लग रहा था 19-20 का फर्क होगा between Trump और Kamala. Yeah. No, this was the 2024 election. तो 19-20 का फर्क हुआ, very close result, but Trump won. Because not only it got the working class or the rural class, it also got a lot of white middle class, especially male, white middle class vote as well. So they are also, and this is all coming from some sort of fear. We are being pushed out, हमारी economics हमसे बेहतर China हो गया है, Chinese यहाँ doing well. Like example, I was in a conference, this is way back in 2018, वहाँ बड़े पढ़े लिखे उनके scholar आए हुए थे, and they were all saying, even our universities are now owned by Chinese, even if all our institutions are owned by Chinese. तो मैंने कहा कि उससे पहले, during the Cold War, most of them were being invested by Saudi Arabia and all that. Saudi Arabia जो अपना इस्लाम फैला रहे थे, सर उस वक्त आपको कोई मसला नहीं था, because Saudi Arabia was anti-Soviet Union. So this talk was going on there. So मुझे लगा यार ये Trump will move, आगे निकल जाएगा इससे. So yes, अमेरिका में ये हुआ. ब्राज़ील में जो मैंने एग्जांपल दिया है, मैं वहाँ था तो नहीं, लेकिन जितना मैंने पढ़ा उनकी जो पूरी जिस तरह कवर हुआ इलेक्शन, वहाँ की मिडिल क्लासेस वहाँ बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग हुआ. Catholic was the largest religion in Brazil among the working classes and the middle classes. लेकिन वहाँ एक Protestant form of religion, evangelism जिसको कहते हैं, that has taken over, right? And they're more animated and they're more populist. So Catholicism is gone a bit down. So ये जो form of Protestantism है, Christian Protestantism, that is taken up, and they all loved the madman they had chosen. But that played a huge role. So the opposition party, Lula की जो है, They tried to sort of regenerate the Catholics again, that it's not that bad. So in the end, what I'm saying, the Lula's party is secular, but they had to play religious politics as well to dislodge this man. Pakistan में भी आप देख लें, middle class when it comes to religion, we all know, are extremely confused. And that includes myself, by the way, अगर कोई वो हो रहा है, कि what are we? It's very easy saying कि जी we Muslims, हम और किसी सेक्ट को नहीं मानते, आप मानते हैं, चाहे आप शिया हो, सुन्नी हो, बरेलवी हो, देवबंदी हो, अहदीद हो, आप मानते हैं, you are into all these things. Go to Friday prayers or any mosque over here, हर किसी का अपना स्टाइल है नमाज पढ़ने का, कि हाथ थोड़ा यूं कर दो, यूं कर दो. दाढ़ियों पे होता है कि एक जमाती दाढ़ी होती है, एक जमीयत अल इस्लाम वाली दाढ़ी होती है. सो दीज थिंग्स ऑल प्ले अ रोल. तो जब हम देखते हैं इमरान साहब भी जब इस्लामिक टच मार रहे होते हैं ना, then he is not talking to the working classes. Working classes तो TLP बात कर रही थी. He is talking about middle class people who are modern as well, westernized as well, but at the same time they say they're linked with their Eastern values and religion. So वो Islamic touch, when he talks about Islamic touch, he's talking about these young middle class Pakistanis. You know? But of course, when you ask them Islamic touch का मतलब क्या है, please define. भुट्टो साहब पॉपुलिस्ट थे, उन्होंने इस्लामिक सोशलिज्म का नारा मारा था, which was a farce, but at least he had a whole theory behind it. You know, कि जी मॉडर्निटी भी होगी लेकिन इस्लाम भी होगा, हमारा सोशलिज्म जो है सोवियत यूनियन जैसा नहीं होगा, हमारा सोशलिज्म विल बी रूटेड इन जो खान साहब बनाना चाह रहे थे रियासत मदीना, तो वो एंड दैट द फैक्ट दैट इस्लाम इज इनहेरेंटली सोशलिस्ट, दैट वाज देयर थ्योरी. सब कुछ तो था. इनसे पूछे आप के लिए इस्लाम क्या है, इस्लामिक टच की बात करते हैं आप, यू नो तस्बीह आप उठा के लेके फिर रहे हैं, मतलब क्या है इसका? They don't have it. ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा उन्होंने सिंगल नेशनल करिकुलम कर लिया विद अ weird idea कि जी मदरसे की और स्कूल की एजुकेशन मिला देंगे. Now this is a populist move. I personally know people who voted for him in Punjab. 18th Amendment, thanks to 18th Amendment, Sindh never adopted that. Single national curriculum, Balochistan didn't. KP had to because they had a majority in Punjab as well. I personally know women in Lahore who were flabbergasted. They say, okay, my sons are going and I'm paying so much money to these private schools. What is this? This is not making any sense. जब उन्होंने किताबें देखी, said, we don't want our children to. Our schools already have Islamiyat and this and Pakistan studies, वो भी आधी इस्लामियात ही है. तो they were, और मैंने अपना वोट दिया ना उसको, आप भुगते हैं. सो वो अगर इस्लामिक टच था, then I'm sorry, that is very problematic.
I was one of those mothers who was totally aghast. Achha ji. So this is very interesting because you're talking about the symbols and the discourses that populists use. And they obviously hit a nerve insofar as people's emotions are concerned. There's a play on emotions. It's not necessarily an issue-based politics at all. It's a very emotive politics, and it is the entire edifice is about othering. So somebody has to pay the price for this. Somebody has to be demonized for this. And it's very interesting how you say, okay, with this contemporary turn to populism, the spectrum that we used to think of politics as left, right, and then there was the whole sort of myriad of sort of combinations in between that has collapsed with populism. So populists use anything from the left or the right to combine it and jumble it up in a way which is very confusing for people who have probably lived through an era of ideology-based and issue-based politics. Do you want to say something about that?
No, I totally agree. I've always maintained for quite some time now that we have entered, aaj mera uspeh column bhi hai, we've entered what is now being called the post-ideology era. Ideologies have collapsed. they have collapsed, right? And populism को तो बड़ी thin ideology कहते हैं, because what populism does is कि वो जो thick popular ideologies हैं, like socialism, liberalism, fascism, etc. वो थोड़ा यहाँ से उठाते हैं, थोड़ा यहाँ से उठाते हैं. Like for example, आप ट्रम्प की अब आप देखें, मैं एग्जांपल देता हूँ. कभी कभी ट्रम्प स्टार्ट्स टू साउंड लाइक अ पर्सन हु फॉलोज और वांट्स टू फॉलो centralization of the economy. Now, the traditionally American right, conservative, conventional right, they want smaller government, no government intervention in economics, let Adam Smith's free hand run free. But Trump wants a more centralized economy where the state is going to play a huge role. जो अमेरिका में सोशल वेलफेयर एक कंसेंसस बना था आफ्टर द न्यू डील इन यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स, वो तो ख़त्म हो गया था. तो पॉपुलिस्ट थोड़ा वहाँ से उठाते हैं, थोड़ा वहाँ से. अब इमरान खान की भी स्पीच से देख लें, उसमें कभी सोशलिस्ट टच आ जाता है, कभी इस्लामिक टच आ जाता है, कभी बहुत ही रेडिकल राइट का टच आ जाता है. सो दे जस्ट बोरिंग स्टफ. दैट्स व्हाई पॉपुलिज्म इज कॉल्ड बाय मोस्ट एनालिस्ट एज अ थिन आइडियोलॉजी. Thin, it doesn't really have a core on itself. It's thin. It just borrows from everything, and it's what is called expressive politics. Expressive politics is you emotionalize everything, create the other to demonize. ये हमारे दुश्मन हैं, सबको उस पे लड़ा दो. As opposed to functional politics, what we are now seeing in Punjab, for example, and in Sindh to a certain extent, functional politics के जी मैं development काम करूँगा या करूँगी, मैं रोड बना दूंगी, मैं ये करूंगी, and ideology is not playing any role in that. That is the era we've entered. China को देख लें, it is not a democracy, but they do functional politics. ठीक है? They वहाँ people, I was reading, you don't come to power through an election as such over there, but people see कि आप as a mayor, as a governor or whatever you are in an area, आपने development काम कितने साल तक किया, successful थे, then we will promote you, right? So that's what I was saying. Populism का ये मसला है, and yes, it will draw a lot of emotion from people. It will, and हमारे middle classes love politics, so expressionism again, mostly because of social media, कि वही चीज़ों पे आपको ट्रैक्शन मिलती है, वहाँ कोई बैठ के पूरी तकरीर तो छाड़ेगा नहीं. But what I've been telling the younger people that we have entered all over the world an era of functional politics, of return to that, right? Expressive politics eventually आगे जाके burnout हो जाती है, and they're not interested in development. खान साहब खुद ही कहते थे, मैंने टमाटरों की प्राइस को कम करना मेरा काम नहीं है. And now I recently heard some lady from that party say कि हमें केपी डेवलपमेंट करने का वोट नहीं मिला, हमें तो इमरान खान साहब को रिहा करने का वोट मिला. That could have been one aspect, but you cannot totally say कि नहीं जी हम डेवलपमेंट इसलिए नहीं कर रहे. So that is populism for you. It's rhetorical, it's emotional. Nothing wrong in being emotional, but the thing is, if you don't let the other aspect or whatever is opposite of emotion, reason, rationalism, then there's going to be problems and confusion among your followers, which will they're never going to accept. Because then whatever you are saying, वो एक dogma बन जाता है, but a dogma based on a very thin ideology. So we are entering in these unprecedented times, जिसका reference पीछे नहीं मिलता. हम लोग कहते हैं जी हिटलर का reference दे दो, इमरान का नहीं. There's different conditions, different situations. आजकल to understand politics हो, geopolitics हो, उसको बड़ा मुश्किल हो गया है, because उसका कोई clear cut historical precedent नहीं है कि हम पीछे देख के याद, अच्छा उस वक्त ये हुआ था. बहुत सी नई चीज़ें हो रही हैं, thanks mainly to person like Trump who made a comeback,
Right, and just saying a bit more about the emotional side. So obviously the supporters of populist leaders mirror the emotion that they are projecting. And I find it very interesting when I spoke, over the last 4-5 years to PTI supporters. I am an academic, and so it fascinates me, social phenomena. And they would, without exception, identify with what you also referred to as the masses. So they will speak this language of, मुल्क तबाह हो गया है और जो गरीब आदमी है वो पिस रहा है और हम किधर पहुंच गए हैं. There's almost this need to kind of identify with the masses or sort of suggest that they are the masses themselves to हम किधर पहुंच गए हैं. There's almost this need to kind of identify with the masses or sort of suggest that they are the masses themselves to make an argument about how perhaps the current status quo in terms of the political institutional structure needs really to be dismantled. So can we kind of unpack this notion of the masses a bit?
Yeah, interesting, because I see a huge dichotomy. आप कोई भी theory पढ़ लें और मेरी अपनी understanding में ये है कि one of the biggest fears middle classes have, especially in developed countries like Pakistan and in developing countries like Pakistan and India, middle class 80 से grow होना शुरू हो गई, ठीक है. उससे पहले इतनी strong नहीं थी, consumption power आ गया, economic influence आ गया, अब एक लेवल तक पहुंच गए हैं, उनके अंदर एक फेयर बैठ गया है कि यार कोई भी आके ये हमारे नीचे से कालीन खींच लेगा and we'll drop back to the masses or the working classes. They are scared of that. And I think इसी डर को populists like Modi हुआ है, populists usually play करते हैं इस डर को कि हम नहीं होंगे ना तो आप ये जो elite है जो सिर्फ वर्किंग क्लास को केटर करती है बिकॉज वर्किंग क्लास के पास अभी भी ज़्यादा वोट हैं, आप नीचे उनके लेवल पे गिर जाएंगे. तो ये कहना है कि नहीं जी हम मासेस हैं, हम मासेस नहीं हैं. अकबर जैदी के मुताबिक 40% के करीब पाकिस्तान में अब मिडिल क्लासेस हैं, ठीक है. बट दैट इन इटसेल्फ इज एन एलीट. हमारे पास सर्टन प्रिविलेजेस हैं जो मासेस के पास नहीं है. यही प्रिविलेजेस अगर नीचे जाना शुरू हुए ना तो इसी मिडिल क्लास को मासेस से नफरत हो जाएगी. बिकॉज मुझे याद है कि जब मासेस वोट इनके खिलाफ अगर करें, और ये मैं किसी पॉपुलिस्ट की बात कर रहा हूँ, तो वो जाहिल हो जाते हैं, अनपढ़ हो जाते हैं, फ्यूडल्स को वोट देते हैं, चौधरियों को वोट देते हैं, ठीक है. मैं नहीं कह रहा वो सही देते हैं या गलत देते हैं. सो वी आर नॉट पार्ट ऑफ द मासेस एट ऑल. आई थिंक या तो अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ मासेस रीडिफाइन करनी पड़ेगी. वी आर नॉट पार्ट ऑफ द मासेस. And we are not very concerned about the masses. We are only concerned about the masses as long as वो हमारे नीचे ही रहें. जर्मनी में आप देखने क्या हुआ था, जमहूरियत मिडिल क्लास की पैदावार थी, बड़ी ज़बरदस्त चली, इकोनॉमिक डिप्रेशंस आए, कम्युनिस्ट पार्टीज उठी, सोशल वेलफेयर पार्टीज उठी, ठीक है ना. वर्किंग क्लासेस के पास एक वॉइस आ गई, एक्टिविज्म शुरू हो गया. सबसे पहले चीज़ क्या की, मिडिल क्लास जर्मन ने हिटलर को जाके वोट दे दिया, ये हमें बचा लेगा. मुसोलिनी इटली में यही हुआ. तो ये रियलिटीज़ हैं अगर हम उनको समझ लें. बट आई थिंक मोस्ट ऑफ द टॉक डन बाय पॉपुलिस्ट, एज आई ऑलवेज सेड, इज टोटली रिटोरिकल. मासेस बोल दो, जमहूरियत बोल दो, इनकलाब बोल दो. आजकल तो जेनजी भी कोई इनकलाब चल रहा है जो 2 दिन भी नहीं चला नेपाल में. अरब स्प्रिंग आप देख लें, इतना शोर, गोरा भी नाच रहा है उसके बारे में. ये वो आया कौन, एक मिलिट्री डिक्टेटर बैठा हुआ. टूनीशिया में ये हुआ, मिलिट्री डिक्टेटर तो नहीं आया लेकिन द इस्लामिस्ट पार्टी वो साइड लाइन. यमन को देख लें, सीरिया को देख लें, क्या हुआ, लिबिया को देख लें. ये तो मिडिल क्लास इनकलाब आए थे ना वहाँ. व्हाट हैपेंड टू दोस, व्हाट हैपेंड टू देम. एक तो I don't know, but I don't think we are still part of the masses. We still not facing what the masses face. We don't. We are a privileged class. We are an elitist class. और हमें डर लगता है कि हमारे privileges ना ले ले. और पाकिस्तान में तो it's fight between elites. ये portion और this family of the middle class उसको हमसे ज़्यादा ना मिल जाए, तो ये आपस में लड़ रहे हैं. एटलीस्ट पंजाब में तो मैंने ये अंडरस्टैंड किया है, the tensions and the fight between PTI and PMLN is actually a tension and fight between two factions of a middle class and upper middle class.
And so, absolutely, and one last question for you before we open to the floor. If you could say a bit more about the relationship between these middle classes and even the old middle classes, like you're describing this intra-elite conflict, कि इनकी relationship military से क्या है? या America में you refer to it as a deep state, but of course in Brazil and Pakistan, there has always been this backdrop of military power. And so, has that transformed or not?
देखिए, ट्रांसफॉर्म्ड अगेन. मिलिट्री में अब पहले वाली मिलिट्री अयूब खान वाली नहीं है जो बाहर से पढ़ के आए थे, वेस्टर्नाइज थे. अब मिलिट्री में आपको पंजाब, सिंध, स्पेशली पंजाब से लोअर मिडिल क्लास के लोग मिलते हैं. सो दे बिकम पार्टी टू दैट टेंशन बिटवीन मिडिल क्लासेस आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट. तो एक फैक्शन ऑफ मिडिल क्लास ओवर हियर पहले इनको सपोर्ट कर रहा था. उसी मिडिल क्लास जो मिलिट्री में थी, एक मिडिल क्लास फैक्शन को एम्पावर किया इमरान को लाके. अब एक और दूसरी वही मिडिल क्लास है. अब वो जब प्रोजेक्ट अपेरेंटली फेल कर गया, तो नाउ दे आर नाउ केटरिंग टू द अदर फैक्शन ऑफ द मिडिल क्लास और द मिडिल क्लास एलीट और द रूरल क्लास और द अपर मिडिल क्लास. ठीक है, तो इनका बाजवा हो, जैसे पहले राहिल शरीफ हो, जो जनरल पाशा हो, दे कुड रिलेट विद देम बिकॉज दे सॉ दे वर एक्सटेंशंस ऑफ मुशर्रफ. Asim Munir ko, I don't know, they're seeing extensions of the Sharifs maybe, you know, and that is why there's anger in this faction, no, कि यार ये हमारे पास जो था ये हमें नीचे धकेला जा रहा है, हमसे लिया जा रहा है. हमने 10 साल जद्दोजहद की जिस चीज़ के लिए आपने तो नहीं की, चाहे आपके वालिद ने की हो, चाहे दादा ने की हो. तो मिलिट्री का भी यही है. और मिलिट्री के अंदर जो डिवीजन वाली बात जब कर रहे थे ना, लोग कहते हैं डिवीजन wasn't really pro इमरान और pro PMLN division. The division was between the middle classes within the military as well. But मिलिट्री के अंदर इतनी सख्त डिसिप्लिन है कि वो कर ना पाए वो. So you see the same division in other institutions over here, including the military.
To make things more complicated, जहाँ पे intra-elite conflict है, वहाँ पे class solidarity भी आ जाती है in strangely ironic ways.
Exactly. बिल्कुल. मैं आपको चाहते हुए एग्जाम्पल एक और दे दूँ. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आई वाज फैसिनेटेड, TLP वाले बाहर निकले लाहौर में, दंगा फसाद मार धाड़, तो हमारा पूरा जो हमारी क्लास का जो सोशल मीडिया भर गया, जाहिल लोग तबाह कर दिया लाहौर को. उनको ना इस्लाम के नाम पे ये क्या क्या करते रहते हैं. चंद महीने बाद May 9 होता है और हमें नजर आते हैं हमारे ऐसे लोग खड़े हैं, कपड़े वैसे पहने, अंग्रेजी वैसे पहने, नहीं बस चला रहे हैं. मिडिल क्लास रेवोल्यूशन आ गया, वाह वाह वाह. तो दैट इज सॉलिडारिटी. हम सोशल लेवल पे, इवन एस्थेटिक लेवल पे भी सोचते हैं कि हमारा वाला मिडिल क्लास कौन है, राइट. TLP वाले जो थे, इवन दो आई टोटली डिसएग्रीड विद देम, एंड I'm glad the way the Punjab government has handled them. They were working classes, genuinely angry, frustrated, you know. उससे हम नहीं रिलेट कर सकते थे. उनकी इतनी इतनी दाढ़ियाँ थी, बने हगड़ी पगड़ियाँ पहनी हुई थी. वो हमारे ऐसे ना, इंग्लिश क्या उर्दू भी हमारी तरह नहीं बोलते थे, पंजाबी भी उनकी ज़्यादा एक थिकर फॉर्म की. सो वहाँ भी सॉलिडारिटी हमें कैसी आई? मैं तो उसको एस्थेटिक सॉलिडारिटी कहूँगा कि व्हेन वी सी अ वुमन और अ मैन ड्रेस्ड लाइक अस, स्पीकिंग लाइक अस, बट बर्निंग अ बस, I will support him or her. I see a man with a hari pangdi, working class, jahil, I will scorn at that person. So that is what I meant by class solidarity in the middle class at least.
On that note, thank you so much. I think it's a good time now to take questions. We have about 10 minutes, am I right? Is that okay? 5? Okay. We can take 2 or 3 together. Please, if you could just take the mics. Hello.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me? Hi. Being an avid reader of you, Paracha Saab, there's probably 10 questions I can think of. But considering the fact that I can only ask you one, will we ever, Pakistan, the Pakistani middle class or the working class, ever see a functioning democracy here? That's all I want to ask right now. A functioning democracy.
Yeah, at the moment there is no functioning democracy anywhere in the world. And I have always struggled to define functional democracy होती क्या है. Because हर country कहती है जी जो हमारी democracy है वो ज़्यादा सबसे best है. जैसे अगर अमेरिका की democracy देखें is very different from European democracy. हमारे पास एक चीज़ है जो कहलाई जाती थी, पता नहीं अभी यूज़ करते, Islamic democracy. ठीक है, so but if you mean by democracy कि जी आपको democratic rights मिलेंगे, human rights होंगे, in the foreseeable future I think things are going to get worse. As I said, we are entering a post-ideology phase all over the world where the state is now only interested its own interest, economic stability, political stability. चाहे उसके लिए आपको बंद करना पड़ जाए लोगों को और political parties को आप दबा के रखें और constitution amendment करें. That is the reality. When I say this, I do not condemn it, neither do I support it. अभी ये observation level तक ही है बात. ठीक है, so मेरा हमेशा ये है कि इसके खिलाफ जो लोग हैं, they will have to come up with a more updated narrative to challenge this. माओइज्म की और चे गेवारे की अभी भी जो तक तस्वीरें लगा रहे हैं, जो लेफ्ट की बात कर रहे हैं, जो राइट की बात कर रहे हैं, that's not going to work. Maybe social media पे बड़ा अच्छा लगता है नारे मारना, ठीक है, but that is not going to work. You will need a more updated narrative to counter this if one wants to counter it. Because जो बाकी narratives चल रहे हैं ना, the state doesn't care anymore. कर लें 10-20 हज़ार ट्वीट कर लें आप, 20,000 पोस्ट कर लें, खड़े हो जाएं आप जेलों के बाहर. State is in no mood. State has understood we have entered this new era. State stability, state interest, economic stability, political stability, geopolitical position हमारी क्या, that is their thing now. वो जमहूरियत आए किसी फॉर्म में और जिस फॉर्म में जिसको हम हाइब्रिड regime कहते हैं 2.0, they'll continue with it. So things are not going to get better if you think about the more idealized idea of democracy. लेकिन ये भी याद रखें democracy के अंदर flaws भी हैं. And I also always have said that we have to start seeing democracy or understand democracy for its own sake from certain awkward angles. इसके darker sides भी हैं. अब ये ट्रम्प जो आया है, ये कोई आसमान से तो नहीं गिरा ना, जमहूरियत जमहूरी तरीके से आया है, जमहूरी तरीके से आया, वोट मिला है उसको. So अब वहाँ मैं कल भी एक जगह कह रहा था 2018 में I was there as a research scholar and I was part of discussions. पहले वहाँ जब 2016 में ट्रम्प आया तो उन्होंने बोला ये कोई चीज़ आ गई है from outside inside democracy and it's eating democracy up. By 2018 there were discussions going on by the most liberal people कि यार ये तो जमहूरियत के अंदर से ही चीज़ आ गई है. So do we need to regulate our constitution to make sure that इस तरह के लोग ना, इस तरह के लोगों का मतलब ये जो जमहूरियत के नाम पे आते हैं, वोट से आते हैं लेकिन जमहूरियत को खा जाते हैं. तो फिर सवाल उठता है अगर हम रेगुलेट करेंगे देन फिर हम तो वी विल लूज आवर लिबरल डेमोक्रेसी का जो हमने वो किया हुआ है. सो वो बड़ी कॉम्प्लेक्सिटीज़ हैं. इसी तरह आप देखें ना सोशल मीडिया को रेगुलेट करना मुश्किल है. इसको बंद करें तो फ्रीडम स्पीच मारी जा रही है. देन हम ये भी जानते हैं जो लोग फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच को इस्तेमाल करते हैं मिसयूज करते हैं. सो डू वी नीड टू सॉर्ट ऑफ से कि जी डिफाइन क्लियरली फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच मीन्स कि ये बाउंड्री है, इसके अलावा उसके ऊपर बात करेंगे दैट इज़ नॉट फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच. इट्स दीज आर ऑलरेडी लॉज इन द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स. लेकिन हु इज़ गोइंग टू डिसाइड इट? दे कीप क्रॉसिंग दैट रेड लाइन एंड व्हेन यू स्टार्ट टू स्टॉप देम कहते नहीं यार ये तो फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच नहीं है. इधर भी अभी हो रहा है. आज वो जो लॉयर हैं इमान उनके और उनके मियाँ को कितने 17 साल कितनी कैद दे दी, एक 10 साल दे दी। होपफुली आगे जाके वो ओवरटर्न होनी है, होपफुली। लेकिन देखें, दैट इज़ द रियलिटी वी लिविंग इन। मैं भी जाके चला जाऊं, ट्वीट करूं, ना निकालो, रिलीज, जर्नलिज्म इज नॉट अ क्राइम, जो लॉयर वो, दिस विल नॉट वर्क. This might get you a lot of likes and everything, but on ground reality is totally different now. This is not going to work. And if you think there's going to be a huge uprising, no. Pakistan इतना divided है हमेशा से. Forget about polarization. कोई सिंधी खड़ा हो जाता है, उसकी वजह पंजाबी नहीं होता. कोई पंजाबी लीडर खड़ा हो जाए, पीछे कहता है यार तो उसे पंजाब का इंटरेस्ट है. कोई पठान लीडर खड़ा हो जाए, नो जी ये तो. और आजकल तो देखिए ना सिचुएशन क्या है कि लॉट ऑफ established people have started talk rot. अच्छा जही साहब को देखिए आप, लेफ्ट के सेक्युलर, वो कह रहे हैं तालिबान तुम्हारे भाई हैं. वो भाई जब इमरान खान और जब उस वक्त की एस्टैब्लिशमेंट और नवाज शरीफ ये कहते थे, आप गाली देते थे कि ये क्या बात कर रहे हैं, आज आप खुद वो कर रहे हैं. So they are just losing the plot because they are using these old narratives to tackle and address certain very complex realities that are taking root.
Paracha Sahab, I'm a huge fan because you believe in rationalism, critical thinking, and common sense. You know, regarding the American politics, one point that you missed out was that Biden was a dotard. He was 80 plus, he couldn't stand up, and he was ruling America, and he opened the gates of immigration. Okay? And there was big problems in America because he was just the gates for immigrations were opened, and thousands and millions of people were coming in America. And the people who were living inside America, they noticed what was happening. And that gave big strength to Donald Trump because he then just shut down the gates for immigration and all. So immigration was a very big thing which helped Donald Trump, you know. That is one point. And the other one is that New York Times supports Democrats. And they regularly write against Donald Trump, and they have the courage to say that he's a mad king and he's a mad man, and you know he has major psychological problems. Now our the newspaper reading public in Pakistan, you know, they don't have the courage to call the populist leader over here that you know he's mad or he has psychological issues. You know, when every rational person, you know, with critical thinking can very easily come to this conclusion, and it's my opinion and it could be wrong, that there is a mad king in Pakistan as well, you know.
देखें उस पर तो चलो अब तो अंदर हो गए, वो अंदर मैड हैं, सेन है, हमें तो नहीं पता. दो चीज़ हुई है, फिर वी कैन रैप इट अप. अमेरिका वेस्ट के अंदर दो आइडियाज थे, या तो आप वहाँ जाके एसिमिलेट कर जाएं, उन्हीं की तरह बन जाए, या इंटीग्रेट कर ले, अपना कल्चर रखे, लेकिन एटलीस्ट इकॉनमी को वो कर रहे. Unfortunately, a lot of immigrants didn't do that, right? So that why the backlash over there. दूसरी बात जो थी कि मैडमैन वाली बात है ना, तो ट्रम्प को मैड तो कहते हैं. रिचर्ड निक्सन उनके एक पुराने प्रेसिडेंट थे, उन्होंने एक चीज़ निकाली थी, द मैडमैन थ्योरी, कि तुम अपने अपोनेंट से ऐसी बातें करो कि वो समझे तो पागल है, क्योंकि पागल नहीं होता. इट्स अ स्ट्रैटेजी, एंड आई थिंक ट्रम्प इज प्लेइंग दैट स्ट्रैटेजी ब्रिलियंटली. टॉक लाइक दिस, इंसल्ट, पीपल शुड थिंक यार ये पागल है. तो आप जब नेगोशिएटिंग टेबल पे आते हैं तो आपका जो अपोनेंट होता है आधी जंग वहीं हार गया होता कि यार पता नहीं ये क्या मुझे बोलते. वो यूक्रेन वाले के साथ जो किया था, बैठा के गालियां देनी शुरू कर दी थी. मोदी का मजाक उड़ाता रहता है कि डर पे रखोगे यार ये पागल है, कुछ भी कर देगा. सो दैट्स द मैडमैन थ्योरी. आई डोंट नो इफ इमरान खान इज यूजिंग दैट मैडमैन थ्योरी, आई डोंट नो, इवन maybe he is to a certain extent, but it's not working. तो ये है. बट इमिग्रेशन वाली बात में यही किया है, I've seen it and I've been to the West a lot of times. A lot of immigrants unfortunately neither assimilated nor integrated, even though you'll find a lot of immigrants who are very well integrated into their economy and are actually did help that economy to boom. But ये हैं complexities, like I said. अब यूरोप वही चीज़ें फेस कर रहा है, इंडिया वही चीज़ फेस कर रहा है जो हम कब से कर रहे हैं. मैं तो अपने इंडियन दोस्तों को कहता हूँ यार तुमने कुछ सीखा नहीं हमसे. सो लेट्स सी व्हाट हैपेंस.
Hi. So my question is, I remember reading one of your articles in Dawn, I think 2 weeks ago, that talks about how the state can absorb uprising like these through like pressure valve sort of mechanic. So I wanted to ask you, do you think the state of Pakistan, does it have that mechanism to be able to absorb uprisings like these in order to still concentrate their power, or are they susceptible to these uprisings?
The states are going to keep using that pressure walls. ठीक है? अब सोशल मीडिया पे भी आ गया, सोशल वर्क कहने दो, या बट कभी कभी ऐसा टाइम होता है स्टेट डज गेट पैरानॉइड एज वेल कि जी बहुत हो गई, एंड इट स्टार्ट्स टाइटनिंग दैट वॉल कि अब बस वी गेव यू इनफ टाइम, वी थॉट मे बी यू विल इवॉल्व एंड सॉर्ट ऑफ रियलाइज सर्टन रियलिटीज, गुड और बैड. अब वो वॉल भी बंद हो रहा है. उसका कॉन्सिक्वेंस क्या आएगा, आई कांट से एट दिस पॉइंट इन टाइम. बट येस, दिस इज़ अ वेरी ओल्ड टैक्टिक नाउ विद द स्टेट्स यूज्ड. जो 60s के बाद उन्होंने बोला था कि वायलेंस इन पे करने की जरूरत नहीं है, करने दो, थोड़ा इधर करने दो, थोड़ा करने की, भड़ास निकले. सोशल मीडिया ऑल्सो डज दैट, भड़ास निकलती है वहाँ लोगों की, मुझे गालियाँ दे देते. मैं इनको ये कह रहा था कि सोशल मीडिया से पहले मैं एक KGB रशियन एजेंट होता था, फिर मैं रॉ एजेंट हो गया, फिर मैं CIA एजेंट हो गया, आजकल ISI टाउटू. सो निकालने दो भड़ासें, डजंट मैटर, इट डजंट बॉदर मी एट सच, बट समटाइम्स bothers the state, right? तो आई थिंक वहाँ पे अब वॉल बंद हो रहा है. नाउ दे सेइंग ओके वी हैव गिवन यू इनफ स्पेस, बट इसका कॉन्सिक्वेंस क्या आएगा, लेट्स सी, लेट्स होप इट्स फॉर द बेटर.
Do we wrap up now? Yes? Thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. Please join me in a round of applause for Paracha Sath. Thank you. And yes, his book is available in all local bookstores, so please do get your copy. Thank you.